thank you all for coming. I guess the reason we're doing this is because over time, quite a bit this last year, we've had people ask us, we've come out here for the farm or for the sustainability center or for other things, and sort of curious about how we got here and how, what our course was. And I think some people have said, pretty directly, this is something they would like to do themselves, become, kind of leave their corporate job or whatever in the city and move to the more rural area and do something more connected to nature or whatever. So it seemed like there was an interest in this, and people would ask about, how we decided to do it and how we managed some of the difficulties and some of the things that were that I would call risky, and what we call risky in the title. So where we took some risks and were fortunate enough to get away with them.
How you doing?
Good. So anyway, that's the idea, that we want to kind of present some of these decisions and what induced us to make these changes, and what some of the risks were, and how we dealt with those. And obviously our situation is quite different from everybody else's, and we're all individuals, and it's going to be for that reason, if we can ask questions and so forth about how during each session about maybe you don't understand something or want to know more about it, I think there's a small enough group that we can probably deal with questions as each of us goes through the section. So let me give you just a quick background before we get into some of the big questions and decisions we made. Julie and I met in Dorchester, which is a part of Boston, in 1976. Julie was 23 and I was 32 years old. We both worked in Boston at relatively low income jobs. Julie was doing community organizing in Dorchester, and I was working for a number of sequentially a number of statewide advocacy organizations, and most of them got defunded after a year or so, and I jumped to another one. So it wasn't great long-term work for either of us, and it wasn't our plan. But I had worked, when I was in my 20s, I had gotten involved with a couple of my friends who we liked to play board games, and we did play board games, and we started getting critical of the games we were playing and saying we can do better than this, and started making rules and things. And so over time, we developed a number of games that we liked, and I've been doing that for about 5 years. And that turned out to be a very fortunate hobby or interest or something, which I'll get into later. But after we met, we moved in together after about 6 months or so forth. And shortly thereafter came 4 kids, 1977, 78, 1980, and 1981, all born at home in Dorchester. So that's a little bit of a background on us, of, how we met and where we came from. When I guess we had at least one kid, maybe 2, or maybe 1 half on the way or something, we became clear to both of us that we wanted to, that city was great for meeting and for young people, but in terms of raising kids and a family, we really wanted to do that in the country. And partly Julie was very much an advocate of good food. I had a garden somewhat when I had room for it and so forth. But I grew up near woods, with woods and streams and so forth behind my house. And I thought that was a wonderful way to grow up. And we didn't have any near tenement in Dorchester. So I think that was the food and the environment being close to nature was an important thing for setting our goals. Obviously, we didn't have money. We didn't have property. So some of the risks were, number one, if you want to do that, how are we going to afford to do it? Are we going to go into debt? We want to, borrow to do such a thing. How do we want to find the cash to buy land? What's the right place to go? Do we want to go somewhere near to Boston? Do we want to go further from Boston? we still had a lot of connections, our friends and so forth in Boston. How important was agriculture in terms of the soil we wanted to get? What are we going to do long term to support ourselves for jobs? We didn't care that much about the schools at that point, but that's certainly an issue for a lot of people. What are schools like in urban and rural areas? And so those are some of the risks that we faced. I guess most of our friends, when we talked about moving to the country, they were like, really, well, how about this and how about that?
Well, they also said, well, will you be able to find any friends out there? And I remember saying to somebody, as a matter of fact.
We kind of made the decision, I think, in about early 1979, that we did want to make this move, and we were going to.
Really?
Somebody's saying something we need to hear.
Oh, it's Jim.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
We'll ignore him.
Right.
So we kind of made a list of what we wanted in terms of the property, and like we wanted at least 10 acres so we could do some kind of farming and food production. We didn't care if there was an existing house or not. We figured we could retrofit anything or build. So we preferred if there was some kind of
No,
Stop. Stop pestering.
quiet.
Gonna mute that person.
preferred if there was some kind of stream or a water pond or some kind of access to water. We wanted to be within 2 hours of Boston because that was where I would still be able to meet with my game design partners occasionally on weekends and so forth. It was reasonable distance from Boston. So those were our kind of requirements or our preferences. At that point, there were still yellow pages, and I went to the Boston Public Library and got all the yellow pages out and did a quick radius of 2 hours from Boston, all the way from Maine, all the way down to Rhode Island.
Wow.
Looked at all the realtors in that area and made a list of over 100 realtors that sounded like we should contact. And we did a list, we listed our preferences and sent a letter out to all the realtors in the area saying what we're looking for. And we got a lot of people responding. And so we, as we got letters back, we made appointments to go out and see them. And we had a Jeep at the time, and we threw Dan and later Paul, I guess, in the back with babies, and just would spend our weekends driving out to these areas, and somewhere in Maine, somewhere in Vermont, somewhere in Connecticut, some in Central Mass, Rhode Island, wherever, to try to look at the property. And we'd camp out, overnight or something, and it was kind of what we did during those 2 years, 79 and 80, looking at properties and have a vivid memory of all the things that realtors thought you'd love to have, and we look at them and say, no, that's not what we're interested in. If you want a field, and people say, well, it's an old field. An old field's got trees about this big in it.
There's a special realtor speak that you learn.
You learn the lingo.
The lingo,
Yes.
yeah. Old field means at least it's been forested for at least 15 years.
So basically, we looked at a lot of things. I have a good sense still of what kind of real estate is available in Massachusetts and New England, really. And finally, we got a call from one realtor who in Petersham, actually, who had this property that we're in now had just come on the market. And he said, this is what you're really looking for. And so we came out, and it was in fact something that had enough of our qualities that we were ready to go for it. And it was not at all cheap. We thought it was about $1,000 an acre, which now is very inexpensive for it was a 40 acre, 39, 36 something acre property. So I think so we said, that's what we're interested in, and that's the process of coming here. We basically made that list, checked out a lot of properties and found one that worked for us. How to pay for it, which was a huge issue for us. We decided when we made the decision that we wanted to come out to the country, that we were going to ramp up what had been a hobby and a sort of not an income producing thing, but this interest in board games. We had developed several that we really thought could be publishable, and we decided I was going to take a lot of my spare time, more of my spare time, and work in that. And so that's what I did. We went to some, one of our games is based on a science fiction theme, and we went to a science fiction convention in Boston and made a bunch of hand copies and played it in the halls of this science fiction convention and attracted a lot of people to play it on different set up tables. And the idea was see if we could attract somebody who could fund it. And finally, at the end of that weekend, there was one kid there, a 19-year-old kid, who said, had watched all around people's interests and so forth, and said, I'd like to invest in this game if you're interested. So that was fortunate. We hit that off well. He gave us enough money to publish the first game, and we arranged for publication of that. I'd work, I'd walk downtown Boston, and my lunch break, I'd go visit printers or die makers or card makers or box makers and things like that. So it really was a busy sort of second job. And once it was published on the market, at home, we used our home address for the office, and we do sales and marketing and invoicing and so forth from there in the evenings. The game was it wasn't a big hit, but it was enough well received that we began making some money on it. And we decided we'd put everything I made on that second job basically into a fund, and that would pay for the land. And I think I made about $10,000 a year doing that, which was reasonable back then, but it wasn't. Couldn't support a family on it, but it was good for this second purpose. And basically, we did that 3 years or something, and I guess I at that point hoped that that game design and publishing business would grow to actually support us out here when we moved out here, and it could do that, and that would also solve the problem of how we're going to support ourselves besides saving money to buy the land. So essentially, by the time late 1980, when we bought the land, we had saved up enough to buy the 36 acres, I guess it was, with what we saved. So that was a huge advantage that we had, that I had that second job, and we'll get into later more about the economics of it. I think people need to think hard about the economics, and if they're if you're trying to make this move, unless you have family money or you're very fortunate and have a good, well-paying job, you're going to have to scrimp and save or work a second job or something to pay for it, because it's hard to do. And we were fortunate able to do it, but that's a big part of the difficulty. That's kind of the end of that first section, I guess. Making the decision and making the finding the place. Are there any questions about that, or the issues of saving the money, or any of that stuff before we get to actually building here and so forth?
What was the game?
The game that we published first was called Cosmic Encounter. It's actually still on the market. Sells modestly every year, and we get a small check for it, but it's not supporting the family.
Here it is.
Oh, cool.
That's our 1977 version of it, I think. It was first published there.
Jack was putting out a game every year that I was having a baby. Actually, this was the one that came out when Anne was born.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you guys, it sounds like you guys did a lot of research on the types of land, like the topology of the
Can you
land.
speak up a little bit?
Yeah.
I'm also a little bit hard of hearing.
Yeah, of course. So it sounds like you both did a lot of research on the type of land that you were looking for, like topology and things like that. Like you were looking for, like, I'm just trying to understand a little bit
I
more.
don't think so. We could have. Do you have any of that?
Well, I wanted to farm. I wanted to have enough open land, as I remember it. And Jack wanted to have some water and a woodlot. I would say those are the three things that we really wanted to have. So we brought my dad out here. I grew up in Illinois, you know, and the best farmland in the world. It used to be the best farmland in the world. Now it's all in Louisiana or the Gulf. But
Mississippi.
yeah, I remember him saying, "Well, it's a little wet."
Oh, damn.
And then later when you come out, you say, "You guys have a lot of rocks here."
He took Rock, Rockford in Illinois, so he put him in his car and took him home when he visited.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, from Illinois standards, it was pretty marginal. And even by 1980, the opportunities to buy raw land, as it were, that wasn't already part of another farm. I mean, this was part of a bigger farm, but I think, you know, you could still buy farms with houses on them and more so-called arable land on them. But we were basically buying some of the back fields from, there's a big house down the street. I think you noticed the one on our side of the road. It was expanded, but that was the Sheldon place, and they had several hundred acres. It was in the particular, these people, the realtors came in and they chopped up and made these, you know, they call them farmettes or something. They had a vision that a number of people would come out and buy 40-acre pieces of land. We were the only ones who did. And then they,
Reach out to
soon
the
after
5
that,
acres, like you sell.
soon after that, they sold it to Properties of America, which was this really terrible scam place that just chopped them all at, you know, 200-foot frontage, you know, with the stone walls in the middle of the 200 feet, you know, boundary walls and such like that. So, but that was the plan of the realtor at that time, was to and make it possible for people to have small farms. So it was a wonderful plan on his part, and we took him up on it.
But we did not check soil maps or any of that research, no. It would have been helpful. I don't know if it would have. I mean, yeah, you can tell good farmland pretty much by looking at it, and we didn't see much of that available. I mean, good farmland was pretty well taken and had higher prices, and for good reason.
How did it turn out?
As farmland?
Yeah.
We've been building it for 40 years, and it's pretty good now. But it took a lot of, you know, Julie will get into that later, but, you know, a lot of labor and bringing in huge amounts of organic material and a lot of, you know, things to, and still, you know, has water problems and so forth. We've got, you know, drain tile in there to help drain the water away, and a lot of things. It's clear to me why settlers know where there's good farmland and they go there first, because they just save themselves a lifetime worth of trouble by buying good farmland if they can get it. Any other questions about the search and the savings? Okay. The second big decision, I guess, that we made once we decided to come out here and to throw our economic face to the winds and see what happens, was this. We bought the land in 1980, late 1980, and in 1979, for those of you who study history or maybe you're old enough to remember, there were two big oil embargoes, and the United States was, you know, for the first time in history, I guess, thinking that, my God, we may be dependent on foreign countries for a key resource like oil. And first time was 1973, I think, and the second one was 1979. And there were huge lines at gas stations, and, you know, people had gas was rationed essentially. And there was a lot of worry about it. And as a result, there's a lot of thinking about what can we do as a country to live with less petroleum and live with more natural, sustainable energy sources. There's not a lot of photovoltaics or windmills or anything like that at that point. There was more ideas. But we decided that that was going to be the way to the future. We were going to build in a way that was energy independent as much as possible. And a lot of books have been coming out, you know, in the last year or so about how you could do that. I didn't know much about building, but we decided that we wanted to build a sustainable house to the extent we could. And we got a bunch of books and read it. And I want to do a little PowerPoint at this point, because I think this is stuff that's better seen on the screen than you can hear me. I'll continue to talk, but I got about 12 or 13 slides that I thought would be useful to see.
I also wanted to just say right now, while we're setting this up, that we owe this In fact, if this has actually happened today, it's both Ari and Maya, who are not Nova, Many Hands staff members who are also tech wizards and who are also have been the amazing outreach team, communications team for this workshop. So
Thank you.
Ari's going to hop in here and make this all happen for you. But yesterday, we were trying to set this up on our old laptop. And it turned out it didn't have enough power to do Zoom. And so then we decided to bring my desktop into the kitchen to set this up. And then we couldn't get any sound. And so we worked on that for several hours. But Ari came in about 10 minutes, had it all set up. I want to say again, want to just let people know how the important people in the background make things work.
Yeah.
If it's easier, people are supposed to look at this smaller laptop screen. This is what I can see what I'm talking to, but
Yeah, have some snacks too. Those are
Yeah.
homemade crackers and hummus.
So basically, we decided to make that a building decision. And here's a slide that talks about the major thing we were using, which is solar. Probably most people know this or remember from high school or whatever, but let me just go through this in case of people who don't. The reason we have seasons on Earth is because the axis of the Earth is tilted with regard to the orbit around the sun. If the axis was straight up and down and orbited that way around the sun, everything would be fine, except we wouldn't have seasons. It would always be warm at the equator. It would always be relatively cooler at the temperate zones and very cold at the poles. The fact that the axis is tilted, and it's always, if you remember, I learned in Boy Scouts, well, the North Pole poles are always pointing at the North Star. Means that as it goes around the sun, it continues to keep the same angle, so that sometimes the top half of the Earth is more heated than the bottom half. It's going around this side of the sun, and the other side, the bottom half is more heated than the top half, which means that we have seasons basically. In the north, summer, the south is winter, and vice versa. And that's crucial to what I'm going to talk about, which is basically how you use that differentiation to give you seasonal heating and cooling.
And
What's
there's
going on with this stuff?
Oh.
Close it.
Yeah.
Hope to go on there. We got two different. This is independent of that same PowerPoint, but
Next slide.
not yet.
Oh, okay.
If you'll see right up on both those globes in red is Boston, and there's a little dot, and that indicates where Boston is in terms of its latitude. It's about 42 degrees north, and so can everybody see that, Boston?
Mhm.
Okay, and so that's about where we are too, the latitude, and you can see that in the winter on the left, the angle from the sun, you see the angle that I drew a little yellow line there from the sun to Boston. Sun's in the middle and Boston up there, and that's at a very low angle. And on the right, in the winter, the sun hits Boston at a very much higher angle. Can people see that? Okay, and that's really the crucial thing you need to know if you want to understand, passive solar heating. Okay.
Next slide.
Okay, yeah, you can. I can't seem to put this here. Okay. Do this one.
Is it chair, just
Okay. And the reason that angle is important is here is illustrated in this graphic. If you see, if the same amount of sun is coming down on that green patch in those yellow lines, you can see it's 1 square meter of sunlight in both cases.
always.
In one case, it's hitting at a pretty high angle, and it's spreading out over 1.04 meters of soil or housetop or rooftop or whatever. And it's fairly concentrated still. But in the winter, it's coming at a much lower angle, and it's spreading out over 2.24 square meters, which is more than twice as much of an area. So it's no surprise. I mean, if you go to, when I went to Cuba in 1996, in February, 2 days later, it was 1.04 meters. And then the next day, it was 2.24 meters. So it's no surprise. I mean, if you go to, when I went to Cuba in 1996 in February, 2 days later, it was 1.04 meters. I went out to the beach with the crew that I was with, and I got a bad sunburn. And this was in February, and I was, why am I getting a sunburn in February? Well, it's because of this. When the sun is higher in the sky, which it does if you're at a lower latitude in February, it comes more directly down, and the amount of heat that you get per square area, in this case your skin, is much more. You're getting more than twice as much sunlight on your skin as if when the angle is low in the sky in a place like Boston. So that's really the principle. It's just a simple principle as a result of the tilting of the axis of the Earth and so forth. So it's no surprise. Anyway, with that, as you can see, the way that looks to you from the way you recognize that is this path of the sun.
You move it forward one more, Maya.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still trying to get Phil on here.
There we go. The path of the sun, as you can see, in the winter, is pretty low in the sky. And in the spring, at the equinox, spring and fall, it's much higher. And in the summer, it's even higher. So basically, that's what you're counting on. The sun is going to be high in the sky in the summer, and it's going to be delivering much more direct rays to the area it hits. In the winter, it's going to be more low in the sky, and it's much more of an angle. Okay, have we got that? That's all the science we need. Okay, and the practical use of that is when the sun is high in the sky, you can shade most of your house with overhangs so that the sun does not come into your windows. See the summer shading basically blocking that summer sun from coming through the glass. And in the winter, the sun is lower in the sky and it comes streaming in the glass. And you haven't done a thing except build your house facing the south with lots of glass and with overhangs, right? And it doesn't cost you a dime extra, except a little bit of extra lumber to do it. And we thought, wow, this is brilliant.
And the cats live on the deck, actually. So that's that.
And it is brilliant. And we thought, oh, everybody's going to be doing this in 10 years. And nobody was doing it. So we got one of the few, fastest solar houses around.
So just for those of you who aren't here, we had to close all the curtains this morning so we could see, but I would
The glare
suggest
was pretty bad.
everyone here is probably baking right now at the
Oh, it's
table.
beautiful.
So we have this wood stove over here, which y'all can see, which is going at a low rate, but that's all we have for heat in the house right now. It was 2 this morning, I think maybe 5 now or something, but today, the forces of whomever were with us to show us how this passive solar really works in our house.
Yeah, if we took those curtains down or opened them up, we'd have to open some windows to get rid of the excess heat. This kind of day in January, no matter how cold it is, the colder it is, usually there are less clouds in the sky. And you're getting more and more sunlight in here. It's just really amazingly effective. That's one of the best decisions we ever made.
So the curtains really do help, huh?
Well, a little bit, but not much.
I mean, for keeping it, mostly we're doing it for the glare, so
Yeah.
you can't see.
For thermal mass, you use the bricks.
Thermal mass.
You use the bricks. For
Well, we'll
thermal
get there.
mass?
We'll get there. Yes, yes. The thermal mass is important. But I was just trying to explain the principle of orienting to the south and putting the overhangs and a lot of glass. And that's basically the basic design principle. And there are other things involved.
But I know that Jack's does a very nice job of being the scientist, but I would say as a pragmatist and he's a pragmatist too, but I just want to say, if you do nothing else from henceforward, you should go home and figure out how to get more solar, passive solar into your living space, because we just save so much money and we're so warm all
Yeah,
the
people
time.
say they
It's just
come
so
to the
nice
houses
here
and they're
all
all
the time.
in sweaters and they come here and they take their sweater off and they roll the sleeves up.
And you can, you do your thing
You're comfortable.
for global warming, et cetera, by not using fossil fuels. So.
Any questions about that basic principle? It's the key to the second decision. But
What's that?
Which is the subside of our.
just the science of it, we can get to the practicality and the cost and everything. Okay. So that's a picture of our house from the south.
Oh, not yet. Hold on.
Okay. There we go. You can see we have a lot of glass on the south side.
Sure.
all that glass, except for the porches on the two sides, is covered by overhangs. The top floor has the overhang from the roof. It goes out about 30 inches, I think. The second and first floors, second floor, the main floor, and the basement we call them. The main floor has the overhang of the deck, the balcony really, that spreads the whole length of the house. And the basement is still almost all glass, and it has the overhang from the deck above it. And we stopped that overhang with the solar greenhouse there, the attached greenhouse. But this picture was taken maybe a week or so ago, and you can see where the shadow lines are for the roof and the overhangs, and they're basically above the glass. So that whole glazed surface on all three floors is emitting sunlight, and the place, heats up like crazy. And so that's the principle. But we don't pay a dime for any of that heat, and everybody else is, it just seems like it's so simple. I don't understand why people have not done it more, but I don't want anybody out of the house be sort of urging that they think about solar, whatever they can do, if they retrofit, or certainly if they're building a new house. Okay, we'll leave that for a second there. A couple other features of the house, just we're orienting directly to the south. That's crucial. You need to orient to the sun. In the northern hemisphere, the sun is going to be coming from the south. In the southern hemisphere, the sun is going to be coming from the north. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, you want to orient to the south. Put lots of glass on that side. The decks, we call them decks, but they're really balconies. They're about 30 inches deep. They're not big enough for decks, really, to have a cookout there or something. And they more are for shade than anything else. They're nice to stroll out there, but you can't function a whole lot out there. Julie's put nice planters on the tops of them all. We have beautiful flowers in the spring and summer. So it looks great.
Yeah.
They're really not functional for most living things. They're not big enough to be decks. The porches on the two sides are designed as airlocks. So we have a solid door between when we first built the house, we didn't put the porches on, we couldn't afford them. And so we just had one door from the house to the outside on each end of the house. And if you open the door to go out, when it's 0 degrees out, you're going to get a blast of cold air in the house. And the idea of the airlocks is essentially you have two doors, one going to the porch and then one going from the porch outside. You open one, you're on the porch and you close it, and then you open the other. And so you keep that blast of cold air from coming in. Yeah, really useful as a device to save energy too. And you can, it helps to maintain that too. If you have a good strong voice, you can yell at your kids, close the damn door all the time.
Or your wife, or the farm staff.
The house itself is a small footprint. It's 24 by 36, which is relatively small for most houses, but it goes 3 stories and 3 usable stories, really. You have a finished basement, main floor, and bedrooms upstairs. So there's a lot of usable space. It just, the rooms are fairly small, and it's longer. It's 36 long and 24 deep again. So you want to get that length so the solar gain can happen over a bigger area, and it doesn't have to penetrate deep into the house. Basically, that's it for what you see. All those features that make it look that way are all design features really related to energy. Any questions about the design question and shading and use and glazing?
I noticed a second
I'm sorry.
floor on the roof overhang at the roof.
Yeah,
It looks like it actually covers part of the window.
covers part of the window.
Yeah, in other words,
Here?
do you think that overhang might have been a little bit?
No, I tried to design it so that on December 21st, all the glass will be fully exposed to sunlight. So this was about a month later, so already you're getting a little bit of
Starting
sunlight
to
down.
drop? Okay.
And of course, the concomitant thing is in the summer, you want cooling. You don't need sun to come in at all, so that's your trade-off. You've got to, our windows, most of our big windows are 6 feet, I think they're 6 feet tall, floor to ceiling, basically, so a little bit on the floor. And so you've got to cover that over 6 months in terms of the shadow light, essentially. And that's what I came up with, and maybe probably mathematicians could come up with a more sophisticated computation of what you can do. It worked pretty well that at the summer solstice, everything would be in shade. All the glass would be in shade. In the winter solstice, all the glass would be in sunlight. It just kind of moves up and down.
Good job.
Well, thank you. I'm pretty proud of it.
Jack, did you use an architect to help you design
Not the solar part. We had an architect who did a young guy who was his first job, and he was cheap and wanting to do a good job. So he, in terms of the beams and the dimensional lumber and all that kind of stuff, he knew what was required by the code and all that. But no, really, this was our work. Like I say, it doesn't take much rocket science to know how to do this. Basically, you do the glass, orient to the south, orient to the sun, put in lots of glass on the south, put in the shading, you're on free.
So in the summer, does it feel really dark in here?
It doesn't feel dark. It feels, there's no direct sun, but looking in the kitchen, a lot of windows anyway. The ambient light, I guess, is coming in. It's pretty
Yeah,
light.
so it's not, because we're on the second floor for the most part, also we're way up high. And I think the other beautiful thing about this is that if we open windows, we have window breezes from all 4 sides. So I would say at our house, even with our wood stove going, our house is much cooler than most people's houses in the summertime.
I guess I was just asking more about, I love a sunny day inside my house.
Yeah,
When it's gloomy out,
We don't have enough windows, probably.
well, probably, right.
Yeah.
So on a hot summer day when the sun is strong, when you've got, total coverage, do you still
Yeah.
have enough natural
Well,
light?
in the north side of the kitchen, there's no sun, direct sun ever gets there. You can see it's pretty bright. And even in the what we call the office, there's 2 windows, and that's totally closed off from direct sun too.
And
But
it
it's,
still feels bright.
we have an overhead light we use when we use it.
we also
often,
have
but-
white walls
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
well, they used to be white.
So obviously east is here, right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, east is pretty much straight that way. Yeah.
So even when the sun's coming up, it's still getting
In the morning.
morning sun.
Yeah, we don't have
Yeah.
overhangs over the porches, which I've often thought maybe we should get an awning or something over there, because it does come in those windows even in the summer, and keeps us maybe to the extent we could avoid, because the porch doesn't have an overhang.
Also blinds us. If you're sitting at the table, going over the list for the day for the farm, it's just like right in your face.
Yeah,
right
so
there.
we probably should have put some kind of design into the porch.
I was speaking to the idea of like a lot of sunlight first thing in the morning. There's
Well, that's the
so many
alternative,
windows
yeah.
here, you get plenty of light.
I think,
And you definitely get sunlight in the morning before it's too hot.
was there another question on Zoom?
Yeah,
That's
somebody else.
another-
Yes.
Good.
Hi.
Now to know.
Thank you. Okay, so I appreciate the whole idea of the lighting, and the angle of the sun and all that, and the overhangs. And my question is, when I've met some people that get the passive custom home built house happening, and if you do not get the right designer, the ventilation's messed up and you can get mold in your house because the house is so airtight. So what did you do about drafts in your home? And did you have to be concerned at all, Jack, about this ventilation? A house has to breathe. And
Yeah.
some of the passive houses, the designs are being messed up. You got to get the right designer. So
Yeah,
I'll shut off my mic.
we were definitely aware of that, mostly because the books and everybody were already covered that for us. And said, so when we built the house, we had 2 air exchangers, small models put in, one in the kitchen where all those pictures are now, and one upstairs in the bathroom. It turned out that because of our lifestyle, Julie is always opening windows, no matter what the weather is. We didn't need their heat exchanger. We were getting air to house heat exchange all the time. And I think it depends on your lifestyle. If I was the only one living here, I probably would keep everything closed up, and that was important. If you have a lifestyle where you're all the time, you know, it's going to be extreme. You ended up taking them out. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you very much.
So a lot of this stuff is lifestyle dependent. It's not going to work for everybody, and you got to figure out what's going to work for you depending on, we're home all day, so a lot of these things work for us. It wouldn't work if you commute and you get home at 8 o'clock at night and you leave at 6 in the morning again. You're going to have different lifestyle things. You're going to have to fit around that. What can you manage? What has to be automatic? Yes.
I have a question about the wood stove. How much do you burn a year? And on a day like this?
I'll get to wood stove in a second.
Poor Julian.
Yeah.
Be sure to get him one time.
Yeah, if I don't deal with it by the end of this talk, I'll let you know, but I've got a little bit of that. I just want to get the solar stuff, because that's so important to people.
Okay.
Anything else on the solar and related stuff like the air and circulation? No, okay. Another, that's too fast. Yeah, this is an example of earth burming, which is basically you're open to the sun on the south, but your other three sides of your building have soil bermed up against them all the way, potentially all the way to the top of the side of the house. And we decided, and that's designed, obviously the soil has a huge insulating effect. Soil at that maybe 4 feet down in this latitude, maybe 50 degrees or something in the summer, and maybe 40 in the winter. It doesn't have a whole lot of change. And so you can use that huge reserve of temperature to protect you from the extreme colds you get in the winter, or to cool things a little bit in the summer. So we decided. I want to advance that one more time.
Yeah, I want to do it again.
Thank you. You can see it's hard to take a picture of earth burning in our house, but we're looking at this from the southeast now, and you can see the burning on the east side, and that same burning continues around the back, the north side, and again on the west side. So 3 sides are totally burned on the basement side,
No.
up to a very narrow window. So there's a little bit of sunlight that comes in, not sunlight, ambient light that comes in through narrow windows that are about 1 foot tall, right at the top of right below the ceiling. So we don't, we have a little bit, enough light to function in the basement without turning lights on if you are just getting something and whatever, but not huge light. Simple thing again. When we came, the hill here was not oriented. The hill was east facing, but we had just with bulldozers, you can quickly move the hill around. So it's now south facing, and you got soil you can berm up on 3 sides. And that's been a huge advantage because, let me get that.
Yeah, watch the time too, Jack.
Yeah, no. This is our attached greenhouse, which is not necessarily something you want to do if you're not into growing things, but it was very important to us. It gives us, lettuce and stuff during the winter, and we start a huge amount of our farm produce there, and move it out as it gets bigger and so forth.
How's the moisture in there? Do you bring,
Sorry, what?
how is the moisture level in there? Do you bring a lot of that air into the house, or do you?
In the greenhouse?
Yeah.
I think in the greenhouse it's fairly dry because you've got, in the winter, you've got air which is cold and doesn't outside, which doesn't contain much moisture, and then it comes into the house and heats up, so that moisture content is even less. If it's 20% in the cold and that air heats up, it'll contain much more moisture, so the percentage of actual dampness might go down to 10 or 5% or something. Anyway, in the winter, it's not, you don't really deal with condensation and dampness. In the summer, alternatively, earth burning does mean that, yeah, your basement is going to be cooler than the outside air. So the outside air is going to come in loaded with moisture, and condense and cool, and that will condense out and hits your walls sometimes.
And
So-
we have a, in our basement living room, which is the room down there, which is in the front, we have to run a dehumidifier all the
Yeah.
time. But right now on the stove, we have this 5-gallon pot here, which is for
Trying to put
keeping it
moisture into the air,
more
yeah.
moisture in here. Because I think when we got rid of the heat exchangers, we realized that we weren't getting enough moisture in here in the winter. So we just put that on, in the winter and we keep it,
It just keeps your throat from getting dry, coffee and stuff. like that.
and your
Very
skin
good.
and all the other things too. So it's our new kind of,
Do you use the greenhouse during the winter? Do you open the door to warm up the rest of the house? Or-
it's always open.
Okay, so it contributes to the energy
Yeah.
budget.
We always have it open, and so, yeah.
Okay. We have a root cellar. We just did a workshop on that. A lot of interest in that. I would highly recommend that. Basically, we left the 10 by 10 section of the basement on the northwest corner unfloored, didn't pour cement there. And left, that's not important. You have cement, fine, that's not a problem. We just save money and didn't pour the cement. And it's a normal dirt, it's really gravel and sand on the floor. And we built shelves and that from maybe in July, that root cellar maybe 60 degrees, maybe 50 degrees, came from the ambient temperature of the soil on two sides of it. And there's foot thick insulation on the other two sides so that the house heat doesn't get into it so much. So it keeps things relatively cool. If you're overheated, you can go down there and cool off a little bit. But it doesn't work as a root cellar. But basically starting in October, it begins to cool off in November, and by late December, it's really where it should be, which is close to freezing, in the low 30s. And it stays there until you have good produce. It's cool till April, May sometimes.
Sometimes as late as July. Actually,
Yeah.
we've harvested, taken carrots out of there. But I just last night, the night before, when it's been down to almost zero, I actually opened the door to the root cellar, to the house.
Did you use the plug? Did you block that up?
No, I didn't. I just opened the door. But I looked at it this morning. It was slightly below freezing in the greenhouse.
The air will be, but there's a huge amount of
Yeah.
energy it takes to get actual produce below freezing. The phase change there is a huge energy sink. So we very seldom have a problem with freezing. Okay. Now we get to the stove.
Now you have.
I don't have to turn it on, so-
When we bought the land, there was 30 acres of woods. And we thought, well, we'd be crazy to, have a stove that, is electric or gas or something like that. And we've got 30 acres of woods. So we will get a stove to heat the house. It's a backup system. And at night, in a windy, cold day, when the sun goes down, temperature goes down, the wind is still up for a while, it can take the heat away from the house. So you do need, secondary heat for sure on cloudy days and at night. And that stove is what gives it to us. It burns wood. It's a small stove. It's modern. It's a current contemporary design. It's not an old fashioned one. So it's insulated sides. The interesting things besides it being wood are that, and we cook our meals on it too, which is really easy to learn. And surprisingly, people are scared to cook on a wood stove, but I think after a couple of times of cooking, you'll get the hang of it. It's not much to it. Certain areas are always the hottest, other areas are always cooler, and you can find an appropriate top area with the right temperature pretty easily. It has an oven, small oven, but we do Thanksgiving turkeys in there, and a small firebox, and that's it. The interesting thing is we found a model that also heats our hot water. So we don't have a hot water heater. If you can see those to the left of the stove, there are two pipes that go up to the second floor, and they connect at the stove in the back of the stove to a small metal box, which fits in as the back of the firebox. So whenever you have a fire in there, that's the water in that box is heating up. The hotter water is rising. It's going up those two pipes. One of them is plumbed to a high spot in the box, and one is plumbed to a low spot in the box. So the hot water will go up the high one and up that pipe, transfer to a water heater, which has a closed loop in it that takes that hot water, passes it through the loop, exchanges that heat from the loop to the 20 or 80, I forget how much it is, gallons of water around it, just like a fire and the other hot water heater would work. And then as it transfers that heat, it begins to cool, and so it comes back down the cool pipe. And so you just have this heat-driven pump system. You don't need electricity or anything. It's called thermosiphoning. And so whenever we cook or have the stove going, we're generating hot water upstairs, and it has a backup, and you can use electric if you want, but we don't use it. And except when we had a teenage daughter, we had enough water. So now, the stove question?
Sure. How much wood are you burning a year?
Good question.
And then if you were to spend a day like this, not turning it on,
Well,
what
we
would
still
it-
eat, so we use it all the 24, I mean, we use it 365 days a year.
But the question is, how cold would it get in here? It would be fine today.
Nice.
Yeah.
On a sunny
It
day,
would be
no
cold,
problem.
I mean, in the morning it's cold. When I came down this morning, it was cold. I think Jack loaded it at 1:30. So when he loaded it before
think so,
bed, and I was down at 6 or something. And
It burned out. by-
it had burned out, and it was a little bit cold, but not frigid. Just maybe it was 68 or something, or 65, I'm not sure.
In the
A
sun,
little,
it's
cold,
75.
a little cold around the edges because of the cold day, but I think by 10 it would have been toasty in here, regardless, with whether we turned on the stove. or not.
Question
Yeah,
about the hot water and you getting up in the morning and having to restoke the fire. Do you have hot water at that moment that you're restoking the fire because you have a good insulation storage tank for hot water, or do you have to start from scratch for the day for hot water?
no, we do. We have good hot water. It's a tank that is designed and sold for solar hot water heating. So it's designed for systems where there's a panel on the
Stone
roof.
lined, right?
It's stone lined and insulated, yeah, just like everybody's hot water tank, I assume. But it's designed to pick up the heat from panels on the roof, and there's a little pump that pumps the hot fluid down and into the transfer system, going through that loop and coming out again. So basically, instead of that solar panel on the roof and the pump, we replaced that with the back of the stove and the heating being driven by heat, so there's no electricity needed. But the key thing is that kind of tank is available commercially. So you just buy that off the shelf essentially and have your plumber put it in, so you don't have to engineer a hot water tank, which would be a pain in the butt.
But I think the only problem when we don't have enough, again, is when I'm training new people how to wash dishes, which is not to turn on the hot water and just keep running it, but actually let's fill up the sink and, use that amount of water. And because I'm really shocked, especially younger people who don't seem to have any awareness about hot water and how much it costs. And
Or closing doors.
but particularly, I think even if you were, if you're on a regular hot water system, a person can drain a tank if they're running that hot water. But so a lot of it is about training people how to wash dishes specifically. That's the one that takes a lot. And, and if you take a 15-minute shower, and there are 3 of you in a row, then it'll cool off. But generally, we have very few times when we don't have hot water.
You have to be conscious of it, and you can always flip the electric backup on if you have guests or something, if you want to be more normal. Very seldom do we have a problem.
Inspiring. Jack, what's that special word that's passive pumping again? Thermo something.
Thermosiphoning. It's
Thermal siphoning. Okay, thank you.
like a siphon, but I guess it is technically, I don't know. Julian asked about how much wood we use, and I wanted to make sure it covered that. We probably use between 10 and 15 cords a year. And we use a little bit more in the winter, but we use a lot in the summer and spring and fall too, because we're cooking and doing the hot water.
And
And we have a
preserving
solar in
food.
the winter, so it's not loaded that much to the winter.
When we preserve food in the fall, that's
We do a lot of food preservation in the fall, so
fast
boiling,
boil on the stove. So.
yeah, boiling huge amounts of water in the fall. Any other questions on this whole?
I do.
Yeah.
As far as the hot water goes, I understand what you're saying. You're keeping hot water, it's running up to the tank. Is it like a pre-tank and then it goes into a regular hot water tank?
Upstairs?
Yeah, is it like a preheat or is it?
There's a coil. The coil that comes out,
You mean there's a little box in the back of the
It's like a
stove?
heated
but he's talking about the tank.
Yeah, so this is why, let me tell you why I'm
Yeah.
asking. My understanding was, because I was looking, after I had seen this before, I was looking at hot water tanks are thrown away all the time. They already have connections, they already have, if you built a solar box and put the hot water tank in there, ran the water and let the sun heat it up and run it back through, it's another way to help warm the water.
Maybe,
The reason I said that,
yeah.
because I really loved what you did here. And then when I researched it, I was talking to some of my plumber friends, and they said there was a plumbing like concern, or maybe a code thing, or like a system where you want to use a hot water tank, the way they have it set up, because they worked through some type of problem they had. If the water stayed in the tank, it could create
Well, it can blow.
a question with the water, like the actual quality of the water.
Oh,
Like,
okay. I blew a couple times. Because it got too
Well,
hot.
but if you guys are using it all the time, it's probably not a problem. This is when
Well,
the water sat for a period of time.
Yeah, you need to be conscious of times when you lose power and the well goes out, and so you don't have pressure in the house, and so that whole system also depends on water pressure to refresh the water in the tank. So if you draw it down very much, you can still draw it down a little bit because it's high, and gravity will bring it down even though it doesn't have pressure. You will be reducing the amount of water in the tank, and you're still running your stove, so you're heating it more and more and more. So you can generate steam ultimately, and that would generate pressure. And so they install vents and valves that are, can let that off safely. So there's a good deal. When our plumber came to install that tank, it wasn't just put it in, hook it up. You had to think out that a little bit and make sure there was safety valves for that. In terms of the quality of the water,
From what I understand, I think it's fine as long as you circulate it.
yeah,
If
I
somebody
would
had
think it would take a
If
long
somebody had a
time.
camp that they didn't use, I think that's where
And
the
rust in
problem
the
came.
tank or something like that,
And
maybe.
the
yeah.
hot water stayed in the tank.
I think it's a
without being
different issue.
circulated.
It is that here, the temperature gets high enough so E. coli and so forth gets eradicated. With the sun, what you described, it's not going to warm the water enough to reach the temperature to kill the bacteria. So I think that's a big problem there. So you can have an ecosystem developing the water. It's not going to be the case here. The
I
water
think there's
is
another concern more political.
Okay, we've used
We'll discuss.
two-thirds of
more
our
about
time on the
over
first two decisions we
More over
made, so anything important we
Yeah.
need? Can we go on to the third one?
Do you want the stove during summertime too?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. We
So
like
how
to eat,
hot
we
does
like to eat.
How hot does it get in here then?
It's not that hot.
Okay,
I
We
mean,
open a lot of
it's hot
windows.
near the stove.
Yep.
But it's really, like I said earlier, I've been in many people's homes who have a gas stove or an electric stove, and in the summertime, and it's much hotter. Because we have all this freeze, I open all the windows and we have constant airflow, and we're on the second floor. also.
okay.
Yeah, there are times when it's uncomfortable, but it's really in the fall when we're doing canning and we just generate huge amounts of steam. You just really have to open all the windows. We have an attic fan that takes the heat up and out. So the things you would,
And we put a big fan over here in the corner a lot.
yeah, fans, and we don't have any air conditioning. Never
One
will. I
out
don't
the
think we
floor,
need it.
open that door and put one that goes across the house.
Yeah, certainly just the design, I think the open access makes it cool too. Okay, the third thing I want to talk about, I think we're done with the PowerPoint, right?
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, okay, some other things to talk about real quick.
Oh, my God, John.
This is good. Is it? Just have to click into the window again.
When we moved here, I had come from Dorchester. We were always getting, frozen pipes in the house. And I decided for sure we're not going to have any water pipes on the outside walls. So we designed a internal plumbing wall that basically the two bathrooms are on top of each other. The kitchen backs up to the bathroom. So all the water systems are on internal walls. And we once went away to visit Julie's folks when they were in Wyoming, and in January, the temperature got down to about 10 below here, and we were gone for 2 weeks. We didn't do anything about the plumbing. Came back, and the temperature in the basement was in the 40s, I think. So the solar, the thermal mass, and all that stuff just really protects you. So you don't have to worry about all those kinds of things. Basically, it's just a huge convenience to have that internal plumbing wall design. The house has got 6-inch walls, so we're 6 inches insulation instead of normal 4. Not a huge difference, but it matters. The attic floor, we did 6-inch bats, and then we put polystyrene sheets the other direction. So it's more attic insulation, I think, than most places. We have some gravel buried in the basement. Just put, ran a 4x4 pit essentially in the south side of the basement before we did anything else, before we poured the floor, filled that with gravel. So there's a lot of thermal mass there. The exposed basement walls we insulated with 2-inch polystyrene and then flashing. So they're exposed to the sun, but the flashing will protect them from ultraviolet. So you actually have insulation on what remains of your basement walls after you've got the earth burning. And then the big thing I thought was when you construct something, you have little gaps around your windows and doors, and if you add this all together, you've got a big space that's open to the outside. And we just paid a lot of attention to foaming that with this commercial products, and paid a lot of attention to insulation generally. So that's just general building stuff. And there's
Is
our
that it?
there's our
Yeah, you can go to your beautiful slide, Maya.
Oh.
the final slide is I thought we could
Oh,
leave up for a minute in case
Hold
people
on.
want to get a hold of us. That's all right.
No, let's get it up. This is Maya's artwork here.
Um, that one after that should be, yeah.
There you go.
Okay, we're going to move on to the third big decision we made.
So
Which
zip
was-
jar, just if you want to take any of that down, you can find us everywhere these days. So hopefully we're not,
the internet is amazing.
hopefully not wearing you all out with it, but yeah, and take a look at all those and then maybe just take it down so people can all see each other again. I could unshare that.
The third decision was avoiding consumerism and debt. Our principle was we want to avoid debt whenever possible. You're paying interest, you don't necessarily know that you're going to have the money. It puts a huge amount of pressure on you if you have to, honor payments that you don't have money for. And of course, the best way to avoid that is to reduce your expenses so you buy only what you absolutely have to have and can't make it or fix an old one or something like that. And there were probably 10 years or something. The first 10 years when we came out here, we were very, very poor. And we just did not have any extra money at all. And if we did, we probably would kick it into the farm to buy hoses or fence posts or something like that. But obviously the risk involved in that, in not having debt and trying to do that as a principle, is you run out of money, especially when you're building the home. How do you stop that and how do you deal with that? You need vehicles, you've got, they're expensive. You need health insurance, that's expensive. You want to send your kids to college. I mean, those are all big expenses, and you don't want to drop out of society totally, and you want to be, a productive member of society and treat your kids reasonably. But how do you sort through all that? Our solutions, which may be different than yours, but what we felt was important. We would buy the land up front with money, with savings. So we didn't buy the land until we had the money, and didn't have to borrow anything to buy the land, which was great. And then we continued to save at the same rate. Even if we bought in 1980, we didn't build until 82. So we had another couple of years worth of savings built up mostly from the game business that we had on the side. We minimized the housing costs. The most important one was we built it ourselves with our own labor. We paid for key things like construction, like cement work, excavation, plumbing, and electrical. But I think virtually everything else we did ourselves. We did all the carpentry. We did, most of the sheetrocking and all the trim. All the things that could really mount up in a house. I mean, electrical and plumbing are expensive, but well, anyway, we minimize those costs a lot. See, one way to get help when you're doing things that need more than the two of you, and you got 4 little kids, and you even have 2 oftentimes, was I would write a little newsletter every week about people. We'd invite people out. Some friends of ours might come out for 1 week, and I'd write a little newsletter saying, here's what we did. It was really fun. We enjoyed. We'd have a nice meal for everybody, and we'd send it out to 30 people or something.
People, yeah, I hear you laughing, Jim, because Jim was one of our most ardent supporters during that time period.
But we'd get friends who came out more as a lark and to help out, but we planned the kinds of things, putting up the rafters and doing things that needed a lot of people for those times. And we made them into sort of fun events that people would be proud to help us with, and we certainly needed the help. And so that was one way to get the extra labor. We focused just on building the required things. We had to have a closed-in shell, essentially, with the systems that would work, but no insulation at the beginning, no trim, no inner doors, no inner finished floors. All that stuff is very expensive relative to 2x4s and putting up the basic shell that you can live in. So you can save a lot of money just by phasing it out. We didn't actually finish the house, I think, for 10 years or something in terms of putting in finished things. We waited to put the porches up. That was not essential. Waited to do the clapboard still a little bit later. All this finished trim and floors and stuff, all the cabinets, everything we did. I did them myself, but it took years before we get everything ready. We did accept some short-term financial help from family. We had it paid back within 3 or 4 years, I think, but we couldn't afford everything, even to close in. So when we got to the end, we needed to borrow, I forget, $20,000, $30,000, I think, which seemed like a lot to us, but it was. I wish I had kept better records when we bought the house and when we built the house and what we paid. I would guess it was somewhere like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. I don't know altogether, but I don't know. Things are a lot less than, and I threw out the checkbook years ago that we paid for, so I can't recompute that. But we did have a family, loans that helped out, considerably at the very end. We kept our 10-year-old car and truck. It broke down a lot, but we would fix it and keep it going. And never used credit cards unless we could pay, pay what was due immediately. Didn't have to pay interest. Health insurance we decided to do without. We paid, I think, monthly into our own fund in the bank. I forget how much we did. It wasn't much, but we would have something. So if we went to the doctor, we would have something, and we say we can pay cash. And doctors were quite willing to accept that. In fact, one time we went for something big, and they said, "Well, I'll tell you what. If you pay cash, I'll bill you half what it would cost anybody else, because half of that money goes to insurance and processors and all that kind of stuff, and I don't get it for a long time. I'm really happy having a cash transaction." So you can save money doing that too. If you've got cash, you've got some power. If you're, beholden to insurance companies and all that, you don't have that power. College, we started a college fund in 1988, 6 years after we came out here. I'd gotten a big check for a game, and I said, "Julie, we got to put these kids through college, and Dan's going to go in 9 years or something, and we've got to have money. I want to put most of this check into college fund and not spend it." We had a big argument about that. We continued to fight about that, but it was important to me, and she gave way.
I'm a college dropout, so I didn't think it was that important.
I went to an expensive college. So I wanted to offer that to my kids, and I didn't have debt. When I got out, so I didn't want my kids to have debt. So that was extremely hard for us to be able to put away money, but we did every year. And by the time we had the kids to go, there were a couple of years where we had 3 kids in college at the same time. So fortunately, the colleges recognized that economic stress and gave us some really good deals on scholarships and so forth. So we were able to put the 4 kids through college without debt. 3 of them to, sort of small liberal arts colleges, one to the University of Massachusetts. So that's what they wanted to do. So I think that's basically it on avoiding consumerism and debt. It's very important to survive out here, especially the first years when you're struggling to find your job and everything and find a reasonable income. So that was very risky, I think, to go without health insurance. But our theory was we're eating well, it's a healthy environment. If something happens, it's probably going to be a car accident. We already had car insurance. We couldn't avoid that. Somebody breaks a leg, we'll have to pay for that and accept, some kind of long-term payment plan or something, but we tried to avoid that. we didn't have any big injuries or something like that. So a lot of people may not take that risk, but we thought it was worth it. Any questions about that whole issue?
I'd just like to say good job with,
Lucky.
working the whole house in. And that was a generational thing. I think the people from the new generations don't, it's such an entitlement generation for the most part, certainly not everybody.
Careful.
Nobody on this
Exactly.
call.
But for you to actually put the shell up and live here and build it as you go, and that was more, when I grew up, that was more, how it was.
You may
I'm
be
starting
right.
to get up
yeah,
there too.
I don't know.
And I've seen a lot of people do that, and they would live with a shell
Yeah.
and work it, and I just think it's amazing. It's a lot to work through,
Yeah.
and to still like each other.
We'll get to that.
That's my question. Is the relationship, we'll say that first.
All right. The fourth decision was to raise all the food, basically, and Julie is, of course, the expert on that.
Yeah, I don't know what to say a whole lot about that, except that I remember, again, when we moved out here, Chuck was 0, he was 9 months old, and Ellen was 2, and Paul was 3, and Dan was 4. And I remember my first garden was in a couple perk hole sites, places that he had used for perk that, had been turned over already. So I remember planting some broccoli here and there. And so I had a vision that we didn't necessarily both share, that I was going to be a farmer and he thought we'd be homesteaders. And so we thought about that a little bit too, because he felt that rightfully in our situation that we weren't ever going to make any money as farmers. But I still wanted to be a farmer. I grew up on a farm and I like raising food. I like serving food to people. I like food, right, Chloe?
It's good food.
So it was great. And, we slowly built our garden and, tried to do all that. We had a little bit of a garden during that first year, 1982. And, did more and more as years went on, I guess. And made our first sale in 1984, I think, and making our first real sales, it seemed like, in 1985, and then started our CSA in 1992. And then, so we were, really much more doing stuff for the public. But I grew up, my grandmother and my mother and my aunts and such, would write letters every week. And the letters always included how many quarts of peas, how many kinds of strawberries, how much corn they froze, all that kind of stuff. That was always part of the week's letter. I mean, and that was, the accomplishment and this pride around food preservation, around doing stuff for your family. So that's the kind of heritage that I come from, which is to, raise it and preserve it and serve your own food as much as possible. And I was also, since the early 70s, very much about organic only and, no shit, basically. So that was something that I took on with great vigor, I guess, was to really raise all of our own food. And we had rabbits in Dorchester. We had our yard was 10 by 40, and in the back, in the 10 by 10 area, we had a compost bin and 3 rabbit hutches, and then a little area for the kids to play in. And then in the front, and we had a garden that was 10 by 30 down to the street. So, I was already on that track of trying to raise as much food as possible for the family. So it was very exciting to come out here and be able to get moving on that. Got involved with NOFA, the Northeast Organic Farming Association, early on, and really enjoyed the learning from other people. And soon I was, starting to get employment myself. For a while there, I was just raising kids mostly, so I wasn't working or getting paid for anything. But NOFA needed some help getting more off the ground, and we took over running the summer conference. And part of that included lining up 100 to 120 workshops every summer for the conference. So the great part about that job was I call all these people and get them to line up for the workshops. And while I'm there, I was interviewing them about, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And so I really appreciate how NOFA, as that organization, has helped me throughout all those years to have this great, array of people to talk to about how to raise food. So I think one of the things that I remember, this is a great anecdote for you to think about the fighting part, Alicia. We got a tractor early on, but it didn't have a bucket on it, and it didn't have. It was a little Ford 9N, I think, right? The
Didn't
first
have
one.
four-wheel drive either.
And no four-wheel drive, so it could pull a cart, but there was a point when Jack and I were, one Saturday, we were trying to move one of our mobile chicken houses up the hill together. And I said, Jack, it's time, I want to get a tractor with a bucket and four-wheel drive. I don't think I was crying at that moment, but it was after several years. I don't remember how many years we were here, but we finally got the tractor with the four-wheel drive, and so it's not like I'm still moving chicken houses every day. Sometimes as many as 16 or 19 by hand. But I say Jack really came from a much more frugal household. My father was a veterinarian, and so I think we had enough money that he was able to, he would be more buy stuff as we needed. My parents were more open with that, spending the money, and Jack's parents were much more, grew up in the Depression times, and we're going to squirrel away every cent and not spend unless we have to. So that was the struggle for us, was that I would call what I was generous, and what he was stingy, and he would call what he was practical, and I was impractical. But you know how those conversations go. But I think we worked that stuff out, and we had a lot in common about what and the priority to be home with our kids, which was really great. And we did send them off to school because we didn't want them to be too much with us. And I really felt particularly that they needed more socialization than being here. As it was, they were enough isolated that, like, during the summer and stuff, there weren't kids. Closest neighbors were a mile away to go visit and stuff. So they went to the public schools, but we chose all these things, but we would do a lot of kind of homeschooling things at the end of the day and on weekends. And I think that it was one of the easier things for us was that we agreed on a lot of things that were important to us, and raising that food and having a family-centered lifestyle and reading stories every night, and early on having children at home, having a family bed, all these things. And basically Jack and I are both fourth, and he's fourth, I'm fifth, but we're both last children. So we're both somewhat renegades and not wanting anybody to tell us what to do. So we have fought, still do, about not wanting the other one to tell us what to do. But our general approach to the world is, think for yourself. And, in that way, we were very aligned in making judgments based on what we thought was the right thing to do, as opposed to going along to get along. So I may have strayed a bit, but thought maybe those are some of the things you might want to hear about.
Yeah. Let me just close up very quickly. The fifth decision, I guess, was, as Julie touched on, that we were going to be at home full time, both of us, not commute to a job. And I had to commute, for until Dan was 5, I guess, and then I went to New York, so 7 or 8 really. So I really craved being home and being with my kids and seeing them grow up and being a important part of their life. But it took us a while to get there. I had for a while, our only source of income was this game business, which was not a whole lot. And then that kind of petered out, and I started taking fix-it jobs and so forth around, just to keep bread on the table, so to speak. It wasn't really bread. Keep the card running. And then we after we were here a couple of years, Julie got involved in this organization, NOFA, which was just a fledgling organization, a handful of people, but it really met a lot of our values and so forth. And she got elected to the board and said, well, I'll volunteer to answer the mail do bookkeeping and stuff. And then pretty soon that became a serious job, and she got paid part-time for that. We got involved in running the summer conference in 1987, 5 years after we came here for NOFA. And that was more of a serious job, still part-time. But and then 1988, the next year, I took over the Natural Farmer, which is a newspaper of the 7-state organization. So we found a good match for our skills in a nonprofit organization that was based on our values and in our area. And I don't know what to say, except I think that kind of stuff is available for everybody if you look for it. And whether you have practical hands-on skills, you're a theoretician, you're a bookkeeper, whatever it is, you've got some capacity to be of value to other people. I think the internet is proving that, hugely in our economy. And I guess if I want anybody to leave this workshop with anything, it's, have the confidence in yourself to go out there and test, and you will find, I think almost in every case, that you can support yourself in some creative way by adding value. It's not necessarily what you always choose to do, but at least you can do it at home. You can do it on the internet. You can, do those kinds of things. So by the time 1990 came along, we were basically both full-time supporting ourselves at home, doing work for this organization that met a lot of our farming goals, and doing the farming on the side, if you will, economically, although it was a huge amount of our labor and time, because the farming did not, support paying an income. We were still investing in building it up. So that's the lesson, to work at home and to have confidence in yourself that whatever your values are, if you want to work at home or whatever, you can do it. And I think especially as the economy eases up, more and more stuff is happening to enable that. So I think because, commuting and corporate work and all that kind of stuff is dying down compared to this spring up with stuff. But that's really it for our 5 decisions.
Let me just say something about I think what I've learned as I've gotten older is, I've always been pretty good at knowing what it is I needed to do right then. When I quit school, I went out to save the world as a community organizer. And when I met Jack, it's like, gotta have a bunch of kids, and then gotta raise them in the country. And I've been one to follow my instincts, I guess, pretty thoroughly all the way along. But I think that we all have this inner. We all know who we are inside somewhere, and the more that we can get to the place of acting out who we are more hours of the day, that's when we really are in tune with our gifts in the world. And I think, I think the abundance of the income or whatever it is or the mate or whatever it is that you're looking for, or the community, it all shows up as you become more who you are, I guess. So that would be my final statement for today.
Okay, we have people who, some people who are here wrote some questions, and in the very short time we have left, we'll try to deal with them. One question is, Julie, to answer, what is something you wish you did or were glad you did in the first few years?
I hadn't thought about this really that much. Wished I did.
You want to take it in a minute after you think about it? Or you want me to?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, next one for me, I think, in the future, where the next generation lacks the capital to own their own land, how can we take your model and make it our own? What other arrangements besides actual land owning have you seen that work? I've seen lots of other arrangements, but still, I think land owning is the best thing in America right now because you have control. And most of us who are young and interested in doing this are willing to put huge amounts of labor uncompensated into a homestead if we get equity, and we know that we're going to pass it on to our kids, and it's going to be there when we're old and all that kind of stuff. And if you're renting, if you're leasing, and you're there at the suffrage of somebody else, you don't have that confidence, and you think, why should I bust my butt for the next 10 years if they're going to kick me off on year 11? So equity is very important. I think land trusts, for instance, sometimes offer 99-year leases. That's pretty good, and for a lot of people, that would suffice to give them equity. They figure, I give it to my kids and they can sell them, still be 99 years or whatever. So that's close to equity. When we die, or before we die, we're going to transfer our development rights to a nonprofit so that our land cannot be developed, and therefore it's always going to sell for less than it would normally sell for. Nobody can ever put new houses here or whatever else. And more and more people are doing that in an effort to save their land for farming, and land is good for farming for that. You can find more and more land that's restricted that way, and you can buy that at a much less price than normal land because you're not worrying about the development price. It means you will not be able to sell it for development when you die or your kids die or whatever. It'll be permanent. But if that's what you want and you want to commit to that, that's great. That's a good option, I think. The state maintain, not land trusts maintain lists of land that are available that way. A lot of times you can find, if you go to an area and you may have to live there for a couple of years, but you can, find people who are old people who maybe don't have kids who want to take over their land and love to see it farmed. And if you, demonstrate the qualities that they care about, they may well work out a deal with you where maybe you work there for a little while and show you what your stuff is, and you can get equity that way. You get a lot of creative ways. Farming is not such that lots of people want to do it. There's huge competitive markets for farmland, except for really high quality farmland, which is usually very chemicalized and not something that probably, if you're going to go organic, you would want to have anyway. So you take secondary farmland, which you can get relatively cheaply one way or another, and build it up. It's probably my best suggestion.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I am ready to answer question number one.
Okay.
I think the answer to the question is, what did I do that I was glad I did in the first few years? And I think we moved out here on July 3rd of 1982, and on July 4th, we went to the community band concert in town. And on July 5th, I joined the community band. Makes me cry. Haven't been there for a year now because of COVID, but so I had all my band friends, and I still have all my band friends. I also joined the food co-op. At that point, we had a really nice Barre food co-op and got to know all sorts of people who had a lot of very similar feelings about life. So I got to, the kids would, I only went away on Monday nights and Sunday nights. Well, they'd come to the concerts on Sunday nights and run around the bandstand, but on Monday night I'd go out by myself. And there was a tree out here that they used to climb up, and they'd be up, and they would call it their band practice tree because it was big people when I went off to band practice. And the food co-op, that was another weekly event where I got to hang out with people that I, felt a lot like. I think we made huge efforts to learn who all of our neighbors were and visit them. And the guy, Arthur Sheldon, who actually owned this land, had sold it to another couple back in '68 or something. And he was living in a trailer down, 2-3 miles away. He'd drive by every day and say, "Oh, I'm so happy that you're farming this land." You're so sweet. But we went around and met all of our neighbors, and we trick-or-treated there, and we took them Christmas gifts and that kind of stuff. And so that was another thing that I think was really important that I did. And I think then getting involved in NOFA, which I started getting involved in NOFA in 1984, I think 83, 84. And that was a statewide endeavor, but again, to be, surrounded by people that I felt comfortable with. So that for me was like somehow making those inroads in the community and making roots sooner rather than later was an important thing I did. Let me answer the next one.
I was going to pick another one. I thought we were probably not going to get to them all.
Oh, well, let's do it. You don't mind hanging out for a couple extra minutes, do you, folks? Are you folks online?
Oh, I want to hang out late for this.
You're going to come to lunch with us too, aren't you?
I know. I regret that.
Your question coming up: how to build
Okay.
community? How to accept anyone coming in your kitchen, even at 9:30 at night, even perhaps strangers or mere acquaintances. So I don't even remember this, but Kent dropped off a check for the grain co-op at 9:30 at night and on this kitchen table. And I guess I just told him to come in and drop it off, and he felt that, so that was a profound thing. But, you know, we, after being broken into at least every 6 months in Dorchester, and one time we were gonna go somewhere in our Jeep, we went out, we had all packed up and we went to start it, and we, it wouldn't start, we opened the hood and the battery was gone. And we actually pushed it down the street, I think like almost a half mile. It was all luckily downhill to the next gas station, and got ourselves a battery, you know, and loaded up our, probably we were on a weekend trip to visit another piece of land, but anyway, I grew up thinking, you know, you have to trust people. That's, you know, that's where the culture I come from, a farming culture. And, you know, especially I remember in the 80s and 70s, people were like, don't let your kids out, they're going to be stolen. And there was a lot of that consciousness in that at that time. And I remember Ellen, you know, going down, they were working on the road, and she was 3, and she was down, you know, chatting up the guys who were up in the you know, electric, on their little thing, you know, doing their
Electric poles.
poles and stuff. But I mean, I think we have, Kent, we've always had this feeling that, yeah, we might, you know, someone actually stole our truck out of our driveway. It turned out it was one of Paul's friends who had come drunk to his graduation party, and we found our truck at the Quab, and, you know, they driven it right into one of those embankments.
We always leave the keys in the car, so we know where they are.
Yeah, but anyway, so we decided a long time ago that we'll take the chance that we might get mugged, raped, killed, or have something stolen or something broken into the house. I mean, I've always felt like if someone really needs something that we have in our house, you know, well, I think my feeling is, Kent, though, that it's what you put out is what you get. And if you put out this feeling of abundance and generosity, and we're all friends, and we're not here as separate beings, but actually joint beings, that most of the time that works out. You know, Jesus Christ got, you know, killed, and a bunch of other great people got killed, right, for being that kind of person. But I guess it's all about, how do you want to live your life? And if you want to live your life with a lot of people around having a good time, which is really what I'm about, in the dirt. I mean, I like to be in the dirt as much as possible, but then you just open yourself to that, and the right people will show up, and every day's a party.
Okay, I do have a question about that, if I may, please.
Yes.
It's very important to me.
Okay.
It's a subtle question, but I did not ask that question in a framework of fear. What people are complicated, and they'll sneeze in your kitchen when you just went to sleep. And so it's not about stealing. It's about the complexity of human beings, conflict. They're coming in your house. I admire you so much for this, and I want to build my own community, but I kind of, you guys have less boundaries, and I understand that you bring into the world what you give back, but, and I just, people out here are totally trustworthy. They're not going to rip me off. I haven't, it generally won't happen, but people they're freaking nuts. They're crazy. They're gonna, and I love them, but they're complicated. And it fascinates me that you can just be so open at 9:30 at night, and I can walk in, and I didn't sneeze, of course, to write the check to wake you up. But do you ever feel claustrophobic, and like, can you all go away for like a week and I'll see you in a week? Do you ever feel like that?
I think boundaries are important, and I think probably I personally have struggled with having enough boundaries as I was growing up. But I think it was clear to us this last year, we had a bunch of woofers here, that are willing workers on organic farms, and there was one period where we had 5 of them. And it was clear that my boundaries had been crossed pretty much regularly during that time period. And you know, one of them wanted to at one point have some other people come and stay overnight, you know, and camp out in the orchard. And we said, no. So why not? Because we've had enough, you know. I mean, I think it's nice, it's important to have your boundaries. And for example, you know, we also have had these woofers, but we didn't said they couldn't live in the house with us. We have room in our house, but they, if they want to be here, they could be in tents outside. But I think establishing your boundaries, whatever they are, ours might be different than yours, but at least you know when enough is enough and when too much is too much.
Yeah, that's the key, I think, to not be ashamed of your boundaries and say, this is my boundary. No, I don't want to do it that way.
And, we get a lot of people who want to come here and, drink at the fountain of Minnehamp's Organic Farm. So the deal is, well, show up on a work day and work with us and I'll talk to you. And if you don't want to work, then don't come. So, I mean, so that's a boundary that has worked for us, for me on that, in that issue is to, I know when I'm feeling dragged out and abused or whatever. And then I figure, well, what is it that I need that I'm not getting? And and then go back, and that's true for all of us every day of our lives, is to understand what our boundaries are and then just stay with them and be okay with telling people, I'm sorry, you just overstepped my boundary.
Wow.
Here's a question I think I'd like to cover before we end, at least. What role does partnership and family play in the success or lack thereof of your livelihood or the fullness of life? Would these risks be worth taking if taken alone? I think that's a very good question. You want to think about that and deal with it?
Oh, I know who that was. That was from Chloe, right? Yeah. I don't know. I'm a real partner kind of person, Chloe. So I think it all depends on who you are. I do like to spend some time by myself from time to time, but mostly I like to do stuff with other people. I think there is something about what we put out is what we get, and if you're wanting people around you to do these things, they'll probably show up if you make room for them. If you're not a my way or the highway person, I'm always right kind of person, I've got a lot of, control issues, which we all do, we all have control issues, but, letting go of those control issues that are getting in the way of you being able to have that kind of community that you're looking for. I don't think I would have wanted to do this by myself. Okay. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think essentially that's true for me too. I would say it differently. I think maybe you can do this kind of thing on your own if you hope by doing that to attract somebody who likes this kind of lifestyle. And you may well be fortunate to do that. I think there are many people who would like to do this kind of thing, but either don't have the resources, don't have the gumption, whatever. But if you are that kind of a person and you can do it, you will attract people, and you may well find your mate there. I think it's really important to have a partner who shares with you. It's probably the most important decision you make in your life is who you spend your life with. And but this is not just doesn't have to be after that decision is made. It can be a way of finding that person too. It's pretty risky, but it's a good way to show what you're made of and what you're involved in. And organizations like NOFA and so forth exist around where other people who are into those things and values can find you. And so yeah.
Let me just say, can you address extended growing season, no-till, and building good soils? We're going to do 12 of these workshops over the year, one a month, and we'll talk about that on another day. Investment costs.
Well, I kind of covered most of the investment costs. I think it does cost money, but people, you want to make sure that the things are worth it to you, and you find ways to pay for it. And I would say, don't go into debt to pay for it only when you can afford it. Even if you have a wife who wants to buy it right away.
Spendthrift wife.
How many acres did you say?
We own 55 acres, but most of them are what we
bought some
call
more.
rock, swamp, and hills. And
So
so
to do this,
Rock.
how many acres do you think you would need of usable farmland?
to support a commercial farm,
No, not more for a sustainable lifestyle.
for a sustainable lifestyle, well, you can do it on half an acre easily. Half acre in a garden is a lot of food.
Right.
So you don't need the land. I mean, the land is great for other things. The woodlot for your energy stuff, the space for animals, if you want to have animals and you want to pasture them, and lots of good things you can do with land. But to say I don't have 10 acres, I can't do it, that's crazy. If you got half, like Julie said, we were doing it with 10 by 40 feet in Dorchester, and we're producing a significant portion of our food. But what would you say for a family of 4 to live on?
Well, I think a half an acre is really, you can grow a tremendous amount of food on a half acre, on a quarter acre. You know, if you're Italian or some of these people who've learned how to do this over the years, you know, some of the yards in Somerville that I used to walk by when I was organizing, and phenomenal amount of food they're raising in their backyard.
And food preservation is crucial to, you know, keep it through the winter and so forth.
Let me answer this next one. How can one best engage the local community, and how does one make sure that farming stays a physically, mentally, and financially sustainable lifestyle? This is a great one, I think, too. And I think one of the things I've always done is when someone reaches out to me, and a lot of people have reached out to me. I was the executive director of NOFA for many years, and I would kind of cherry pick some of the emails that I would get. And people would say, I want to, you know, this is what I want to learn. And I'd say, okay, well, come on over. And again, here are the rules. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 to noon, come early for breakfast, stay after 4 for lunch. And, but, you know, responding to, I think when you engage local community, one of the things I think as people get older is they don't realize how important it is to keep young people in the system, people that are younger than you. And so I've never have I ever ignored a phone call or an email or a text from anybody who wants to come and learn something from the farm. And, you know, that in itself has brought so many people our way. Make sure that the farming stays a physically, mentally, and financially sustainable lifestyle. I think, you know, at 67, I'm realizing that if I just retired from my real job in August, and I want to be a farmer now. I mean, all these years I've been wanting to be a farmer, and I'm going to be a farmer. God damn it. Regardless of what Jack says. And you know, 67, I have to work harder at it. So I do my Lucy Wyndham exercises every morning. And I do my energy stuff with Donna Eden, you know, for the mental and kind of spiritual kind of stuff. And, you know, I've learned under Jack's guidance how to put together a budget on the farm. And this year, we always have people coming to want to work, and it's like, oh, I will pay them. And then we, you know, kind of get in this thing of having all these people who want to get paid. And you know, this year, maybe because I'd freed up from doing the NOFA job, which I was the executive director, and I was in charge of a $750,000 budget. I could do that, but I didn't ever do it on the farm. And now I've kind of transferred all that management experience that I actually have within me. To say, and we had people right away, I set our budget, and right away some people wanted to come work for us. I said, all right, well, if you want to work for us this year, it's for free, you know, your call. Come and work for free. That's all we have. That's all the space we have. So I think that financially, it's learning how to say no when you need to. And it's also learning how to invest when you know it's a good risk. But then it's working like a son of a bitch all day long, every day, to make sure that you meet your commitments too. I think it's, you know, you have to work really hard. But you have to really take care of all those systems in your body, I think. You know, I'm a real zealot about food, pain in the ass about, you know, I was funny, Anthony came in the other day. Well, I felt like I had to come into a confession, he said, because I had I went to, he said he went and bought a pumpkin pie and ate the whole thing. And he come and confessed to me what a stupid thing that was to do. But, you know, I feel very strongly about the body being a temple, and any kind of shit that I put in it is going to really, you know, disallow me from doing a better job that day. So, and the older I get, and the older any of us get, you know, as we get maybe around 40 and beyond, you know, you just can't shovel shit into your body without paying for it big time. So, that's my story.
Any more questions? We're running over, I know, and I'm happy to end it if nobody has questions, but I'm happy to stay here too and talk a little bit more if people do.
There's one last question here. Are there other occupations or industries you feel need more advocates to support sustainable organic agriculture? And I always say to people now, sustainable organic and also carbon sequestering. At this point, really what we want to do is to stop climate change. And one of the ways that we can do that is by people either eating or growing or both food that's been raised in a carbon sequestering manner. So if you're going to have beef, make sure it's grass-fed beef, but not just grass-fed, but make sure it's been raised on you know, in a mob stocking way, which means those animals are moved every day and they don't come back to that pasture until it's grown up again. And bingo, you're sequestering carbon and you're saving the world. And same thing with your grower, your farmer, whoever it is, or if it's you, you know, don't let the soil be uncovered. Make sure that you're, you know, growing a diversity of crops. And I think any industry occupation, if it's what you are, if it's what you believe in, then you're going to be a beacon for this, you know, for good in the world, I guess. You know, everything any of us wants to do is God's work, I think.
We're probably gonna do something on carbon sequestration, you know, in the future. There's more detail because it's a fascinating thing and it's a wonderful new idea that's revolutionizing farming, and I think is going to have a huge impact in Biden's policies in terms of climate and everything. So there's a lot of relevance to it, but it's really a big topic to go into now. But I recommend if you're at all interested in learning more about it, we're happy to. We're both pretty focused on that right now. Other things about our experience, our risks, our decisions.
Yeah, we're probably gonna have to shut you all off in a minute. So if you have any further questions, the rest of us will probably chat over lunch.
Well, thanks. This is great.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the newspapers under the stove here. Jim has brought for 40 years, and he's responsible for us being able to have a nice fire every day.
Oh. Yes. Oh,
Thanks for coming. I hope you guys have
hey,
enjoyed it.
Bravo. Thank you so
Right,
much. It
right,
was so
right.
insightful,
much.
Yeah.
so helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.